Well, it's so exciting tonight. We're going to have a bunch of questions and we're going to try our best to answer them. And since a lot of people are getting outside and seeing things, if you come across a mystery in your woods and you want to send it in for our next one, you can always send it in to Miles. He's the collector of the natural history mysteries. Miles, let's start it off. What do we got? Okay. Oh, yeah. This one was really interesting. Something has made deep gouges in the base of the large tree. Beaver activity? And this was brought in by Ruth. And oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Susie Spickle, and my area of expertise is mammals, or I try to know a lot about mammals. And when I look at this, I don't think beaver. I don't think a beaver would do that. I don't think it would leave a mark like that. I don't think it would get involved with that type of tree that's so big like that. So it made me wonder if there was another expert out there that might like to take a stab at it. And I wondered if any of the bird experts had a theory. So maybe Phil or Eric?
You want to go, Phil? I don't like this one.
Yeah, I'm looking closely at it, and birds don't come to mind when I see this picture.
Yeah, I agree.
Trying to figure out the tree species as a hint, and I would defer to Jeremy for that, but I have a suspicion it's something. But yeah, birds don't come to mind for me.
No, I agree with that.
Jeremy, we do need your forestry expertise. Tell us, what type of tree do you think that is based on the bark?
I have no idea what the mark is.
Do you know what
tree
type
species? Phil, what do you think? Is that an elm?
I was going to guess a really old eastern hemlock, but I would also go with oak as a possibility.
Doesn't look quite right for eastern hemlock. I was thinking, but it could be, I guess. Hard to tell just from this.
Ooh.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. Brett's wondering if this picture was taken near a road. And I wondered the same thing as well. And I wonder, do we have Ruth here tonight? Is Ruth out in the internet atmosphere? I'm hearing no, she doesn't seem to be here. And Eric, I'm with you. I don't like this one either.
Yeah, Brett's comment is a really good one. As soon as she mentioned that, I thought to myself, I've seen damage like this before in harvest areas where skidders have been in and they've been dragging lumber out. If that was a woodpecker, it would have gone into the heartwood after bugs. So I think Brett is right on this one, if that's where Brett was going with it.
Yeah. Maybe human, maybe a vehicle, maybe a skidder, maybe a plow.
Maybe the wing plow on a snow.
Yeah. Maybe a bored 14-year-old.
It looks kind of human-made to me too. I don't see any chips at the bottom of the tree, which is an interesting clue or lack thereof.
Victor's right on. If it had been woodpecker, you'd see some chips. If there had been beaver, you'd see some chips. It just looks like a wound. Jenna, any insect could do this?
No, I was actually just thinking it looks a lot like damage that you'd see from harvest kind of work. Typically that's done in the winter, and so any kind of damage that you would see, that would have fallen on the snow and then be gone. So I'm thinking some kind of machinery. On all the stands that I used to do my insect research in, it was a lot of logged areas, and that looks like logging damage.
All right, well, let's go to the next slide, see if this one's any better. Oh, I love this question. Birders. Eric, Phil, how do pileated woodpeckers choose where to peck?
Well, we kind of got asked a similar question last time around, and I did a little bit of research since then. And first off, woodpeckers can hear, and some grubs are noisier than others, and they may be able to hear the grubs beneath the surface of the wood. They will primarily, pileated, and this is pileated woodpecker damage, they will primarily forage on dead or dying timber, and so they're predetermining, they're foraging on a substrate that is likely to have bugs in it. And then you'll also notice, and you'll see this also on fascia, where there's a vertical component to the holes, and obviously it's a tree. There's a vertical component to a tree, so it's kind of like a no-brainer. But you'll see this in fascia too, where they'll follow a line, and because these bugs often, and Jeremy, you may know more about the life history of these critters, but my sense is that they follow a linear pattern, and so the woodpeckers are likewise following. If they find a source, they will follow that in a linear pattern and come back year after year. There's some evidence that in Alberta, in the northern part of the range, that a limiting factor on the range size of these pileated woodpeckers is the winter food supply. So if they find a really good source like this, they'll come back to it in the winter and keep feeding on it.
So can I add to this? Just a quick thing about any kind of beetles, particularly beetles that are going to burrow underneath the bark, definitely a vertical component to their tunneling. And there are some that we can actually hear. So the white-spotted sawyer, the grub, we can hear it. It's very loud. Like you will think that you're imagining this. Because there's a sound. Sorry, my dog is trying to get underneath me. There's like it sounds like a squeaky hinge when they're chewing, and so the woodpeckers can definitely hear that.
Jenna, can you make the sound?
No.
Oh, come on.
No. I'll see if I can find it on my audio files. Yeah.
Okay, so Jenna's going to look it up on our audio file, and we'll come back. Phil, do you want to add anything more to that?
Oh yeah, I've heard that sound for sure. It sounds like somebody augering into a tree, just a little like corkscrew sounding little noises. But yeah, I call that term pileation, that when a tree is just riddled with holes by a pileated woodpecker coming back year after year in search of carpenter ants and other grubs. It does look like woodpeckers often make test pits in the tree, and this is purely observational on my part, but looking at trees around the woods, you see tiny little deep holes, but they don't seem to go all the way in. And it could be that the woodpeckers, have some sort of suspicion or something that leads them to this tree, and it doesn't pan out for whatever reason. So it's worth paying attention to trees that just have a little bit of marking on them too.
Love it. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's pretty well covered. Jenna, if you find that sound, you can.
I think I found it. Hold on.
Got it? Okay, she's going to give us the sound.
Can you guys hear that at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
And that's the sound of the grubs.
That's the sound of the grub. They have these giant jaws.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when you find them. You're like, oh my God, it looks like something out of a movie. Like
how big, Jenna?
Yeah, really.
Well, of course they go through many instars, which are the growth stages, but by the time, I would say they're maybe like an inch-ish long when they're full grown, I would guess. But I've had people call me like to their woodlot and be like, what is going on in my trees? Like if you have a bunch of them. So I'm guessing the woodpeckers can hear them. And then the other thing is that bark beetles and things the larger bark beetles will be in the bigger part of the tree, and the smaller bark beetles species will be in the smaller, like narrow part of the tree at the top. So I'm wondering too what the pitch is that they'll hear of the different kinds of insects throughout the bole of the tree.
Jenna, can you repeat the name of the bug?
That's the white-spotted sawyer. It's a longhorn beetle. It's a native. A lot of people, back when we had the Asian longhorn beetle infestation in the Northeast, in New York and Worcester, Massachusetts, people would send pictures all the time of this beetle because it's a really beautiful native species, black with white spots and really long antenna. It's beautiful, but they were upset because they were worried it was the Asian longhorn beetle. But it's a native species, no big deal. It's just really cool to find.
Jenna, there's a question from Karen. She's wondering, is there a specific time of the year where you might expect to hear that noise? Is it seasonal?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that. I've never thought about that.
Okay.
Good question.
More to follow. Okay, let's move on. What is our next picture here? Okay, all right, this one. says, so I've been hearing this strange sound that I never heard before. I hear it in the woods near my place and in other places when I'm out in the woods hiking. I heard it again today. It's pretty low frequency sound and it sounds like whomp, 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 whomp. The sound gets faster and faster until the whomps are so close together that you can't count them. And then suddenly it stops. Always the same pattern. It sounds like it's coming from the ground. I don't remember hearing this before. Let me know what you think. And I happen to know that Victor is here. Victor, could you make that sound that you think?
Yeah, sure. So it's not a really loud sound, but it's a low frequency sound, and it sounds like this. It sounds like, and it goes like that, and then suddenly it just stops totally, and it's like, and it sounds always as though it's on the ground. I never hear it up high, and it's a head scratcher. I mean, it's something that if I've heard it before, I don't remember hearing it, but I certainly noticed it this year much more than I have ever before, and I don't really remember hearing it before. So
Wow.
it's a head scratcher for me. I have
Head
no clue.
scratcher. I love it. Eric's wondering if you hear it early in the morning.
The time of day that I typically hear it, and I mean, it all depends, really when I'm out, but it could occur at any time of day, usually like maybe, mid-morning to even toward the evening, I've heard this. So it doesn't seem to be associated with any one specific time of day.
Okay, I'm looking towards the bird guys. Am I right to be looking towards the bird guys? Phil's nodding his head. Eric's nodding his head. Bird guys, take it away.
All right.
Phil,
I'll start.
you go first this time, Phil.
Sure. I would say that I would venture a guess that was a ruffed grouse, a male ruffed grouse drumming.
Awesome.
From a low perch or on the ground, beating its wings, doing a breeding display. And they typically do start in the month of April. However, they're not really widespread in the woods, so you must have a really good habitat patch that you've been visiting. And they require these younger forest types, early successional forest habitat. So there must be some younger forest around in the area where you're hearing it, I'm guessing.
Well, yes, I would say so. And I have a follow-up question to this too, Phil. It's really interesting. I think you nailed it too, ruffed grouse, because in the bush that's out behind my place, it looks like a chokeberry. And I saw a ruffed grouse in that bush last winter on a few different occasions. And I was so happy. It was like, wow, that's a state bird where I grew up in Pennsylvania, the ruffed grouse. And I had never seen one before. So it was very cool for me to see it. And it was just kind of, it looks like a chicken. It walks like a chicken. They're so cool looking. But I think he was mowing on those chokeberries out there, he or she. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. So what would be the reason that they would make that sound?
That's a breeding display. So that's a male trying to attract females, very much like turkeys doing their display right now at this time of the year.
Awesome.
So defending territories. And they'll do that through the months of April and May, probably further into the summer too.
Okay.
By midsummer, they have little grouse fledglings walking around in the woods. So
Oh, nice.
keep an eye out for a brood of little youngsters following a hen female.
I'll watch for
Very
that.
neat observation.
Really cute. Eric, do you want to add anything to that?
Just that I agree with everything Phil said, and they're reasonably common down here. If you go up to the North Country, they're incredibly common. It's a really, really common sound. And I just personally, I really dig the fact that it's a mechanical sound. We think of bird song as something produced from the birds' syrinx, an interior produced by I can't say this properly, coming from within the bird. Mm-hmm. And there are several species that we get around here, actually. We just talked about woodpeckers would be one. Mm-hmm. And woodcock would be another that produce these, I call them songs. I mean, they serve the purpose of a song to attract a mate and defend their territory. And it's produced in a mechanical way, which is kind of odd, but cool nonetheless.
So are they flapping their wings, I take it? Is that what
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you, Victor. And thanks, Eric and Phil. That was awesome. Let's see what else we got on our question list. Oh, this is for me. Photos of some scat I've been unable to identify. It was found at the base of trees, but not in a big pile like photos I've seen of porcupine or other scat. So I look at this It's really hard to see what that is. It's hard to see the shape. It looks kind of broken up, but here's some better pictures of it.
Whoa.
I know, right? It's juicy, and this is representative of this time of the year. So think about your own self. Think about what you eat, and I won't go any further other than to say that at this time of the year, once those greens begin to show up, these herbivores are starving for juicy greens. A lot of them have just been existing on inner bark. And so what you're seeing here is what I like to call like spring scat. They are eating those greens that are coming up. And that's why on the scat close, right under the Harris Center sign, it looks like it's connected. That's just grass connecting it. So it's just like some undigested roughage that connected this line of scat.
Huh.
I've spent a lot of time today looking at this picture, and I have a couple of tips for people who want to send in scat identification pictures. It's really helpful if you can put some scale in your photograph, like you even put down your hand next to it, or if you have a coin, put a coin next to it. But I can tell this is some pretty smallish scat because it's on sphagnum moss, and there's a little maple seedling near the one that's like a chain. And then you can also see on the one that's on the dry leaves, a little hemlock cone that's next to it. It's very tiny. And you'll notice the scat is rounded. And I went around and around in my head. I'm like, is this deer scat? Is this snowshoe hare scat? Who is this scat? And I'm not 100% sure, but the roundedness of it, and it's not pelleted.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a pellet like you think of a deer scat. I'm going to go more for rabbit and snowshoe hare. And I'm looking at Eric Aldrich, who spends a lot of time tracking bobcats and other types of wildlife. Eric, do you want to pipe in? Eric likes to call me the princess of poop, but really, if I'm the princess of poop, he is also the king of caca. So Eric, do you want to pipe in? Might have stunned him into silence. He's not taking my bait. Eric, where are you? You're leaving me hanging.
No, I think you nailed that poop right to the wall, Susie.
I've got a bad visual going on here.
Do you want to add anything, Eric?
No, I'm good for now.
That's good. All right, phew! That was a tough one. I really spent a lot of time today looking at this scat. But next time, send it in with some scale. And here's another lovely scat specimen that I'll take my chance at identifying. This one I saw in person. This isn't from me, but it was on Jeremy's lawn. And Jeremy, would you like to tell us about this scat since it's on your lawn? He might have disappeared too. Nope. Oh,
I don't know what more to tell you than what you've seen. There was poop on my lawn that was white.
Can you show us with your hands about how big it is?
It was about 4 to 5 inches long.
Okay, 4 to 5 inches long. And you know, location, my friend. Where was the scat on your lawn? Was it on a mowed area? Was it off to the side? Was it on a little rise?
So this was on a mowed strip through a field.
Was it on a little high spot on the mowed spot?
Yeah, it was prominently displayed.
So this scat is some fox scat, and it has been weathered, which is why it looks the way it does. So it's white, and that's just sort of the weathering of the scat, sort of all the kind of nutrient part. I was going to say nutritious part of the scat, but that sounded a little gross. But all the nutrients of the scat have kind of been washed away, and that's just fur with some kind of fungus or just weathering on it, and it turns it white. You often find this on top of mountains, on rocks. It's where the sun sort of bleaches it out, and this is what you have. And foxes really like to leave their scat on a prominent location, and that's why I say location, location, location. They like it when it's on a little high spot. It's an announcement for them. I've been here, I've left my mark, I am the fox. And that's what's going on. And that's what I think it is. Eric, do you want to add anything to that? King of Caca?
No, once again, I think you've nailed it right to the wall.
Good. Phew. All right, let's move away from
Susie,
this.
after you visited, I was exploring in the woods today that nearby, and there's a fox den in the woods. So you're right on.
Oh, you're so lucky. I wish I had a fox den in my woods. I might have to come check that out. That's so cool. All right, so here's the question. Could you identify this bird for us? Not sure if it's clear or close enough. We saw it on the Hiroshi Trail last week. We thought we'd seen a bald eagle at McDowell a couple of weeks ago back. So at first glance, we thought it may have been a bald eagle, but after closest observation, it went back and forth across the water many times. It looks lighter underneath the body, and we're guessing it's an osprey. Thanks, the Zimmers. So Phil and Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, go for it, Eric. Let you take this one.
Oh, thanks, Phil. I thought was sarcastic. This is another tough one. It's really, really, I mean, first off, I will say, and this is my own personal rule, and I always try to impart this to folks that I'm out in the field with. Sometimes you just can't identify things, and that's always an option. I can't identify it's too far, or I didn't hear it well enough. In this case, I tried blowing up the photo, and it's pretty hard to get definitive markings on it. It's clearly a large bird, which, you know, the person suggested osprey. It's possible. At that size, the shape doesn't look right for osprey to me, but that may be just a function of the fact that you know, the pixels are filling in corners where if it was a larger photograph, I'd get a better size. I mean, it's clearly in the right habitat for osprey. And we have them around here. They're moving through the state right now. We've got plenty. I mean, bald eagles are becoming quite common too. It doesn't look right for a bald eagle either, but you know, I'm just going to leave this open. It may well be an osprey. It's most likely a large raptor. Let's go with osprey, but I don't want to be definitive on this.
I would second an osprey on that call. That would be my first gut reaction, which is usually the right reaction. The shape of the bird, it looks, you know, it's just a snapshot, obviously. So obviously the bird can move in lots of different ways, but it does appear to have a bit of an angle to the wing, a bend at the wrist, which eagles also do exhibit. But it does look very pale overall. And that to me is more definitive, as ospreys are very white underneath on the belly. Bald eagles are rarely that pale underneath. So that's what strikes me about that image.
Very cool.
So it's the right habitat for both of them.
That's great. So maybe do you guys know if there's any ospreys to be nesting at McDowell this year?
I haven't been there this year to tell.
In the past, have they nested?
It's likely that they might be nesting in swamps nearby, though. There's one nesting in a beaver swamp near me right now. So they are taking up residence in heron rookeries a lot of the time. So they could be, you know, off the beaten path water areas. Eagles have the choice territories. Eagles have kicked out ospreys of a lot of territories, but so the ospreys are relegated to the beaver swamps around here.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Oh, Jenna is sending me a quick message. Jenna, she says, I figured something out about the white spotted Sawyer. So before we go to the next slide, let's check in with Jenna. Jenna, what did you find out?
So one of the things I found out is that in the northern reaches of its range, which we're definitely in part of that, they can take up to 4 years to go from egg to pupa. So it really depends on where they're living. Like up in the White Mountains, they might take that full 4 years. And so when Karen asked about the time of year you might hear the chewing sound, I'm sort of going to say any time when they're active, when it's warm enough inside that tree in the summertime, you could hear that, because it would have to be probably a larger larva, but you could probably hear it any time because they're in there for so darn long.
Wow. Thanks, Jenna.
Yeah.
That was great research.
Sure.
Right on. Way to go. All right, let's see what else do we have?
Hey, Susie, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure, Jeremy.
So one of the
Wait, you're on mute. He's like, what? How'd that happen?
one of the early experiences in the lumber industry was creating paneling for rooms, and they didn't kiln dry it originally. And so larvae like this would survive, and they slowed way down in their process. So for 15 years, they could be sort of gnawing away in there, and then they'd emerge after that in people's living rooms.
No.
So it's a fascinating, when the tree isn't alive or even outside and it dries inside, their whole life cycle slows way down.
Wow. That's really cool, Jeremy. Thank you. I'm going to have some nightmares about that. That's really sweet. All right, let's move on. Let's see what else we got in our list of things. Oh, all right. This is from me, and it's just a cool thing to check out. It says, imagine being able to touch where a black bear left its claw marks on a tree. Or maybe the bruin even stood on its hind legs and bit the tree. And what if you could find bear fur stuck in the splintered wood of the tree? So lots of people have been out hiking on roads, dirt roads, any roads that have telephone poles or utility poles, are perfect kind of poles for bears to leave their territorial marking. And what we're seeing here, you might have been walking by these all along and just thought it was a plow. But if you take a good close look at it, what you're actually seeing is a bite mark. And the bite mark is made by the bear turning its face to the side and biting it with its kind of side teeth, its cheek teeth as we call them. And this is the bite mark right here, kind of where it bit. And then you can kind of see some fur stuck in there, and their fur gets stuck in the tree because after they bite it, a lot of times they'll rub against it or turn their back and rub against it and reach up behind them and scratch the tree. And it's all territorial marking. So next time you go out on a walk on your road or on a dirt road, check out the utility poles and see how many of these you can find. It can be a good indication of black bears in your own neighborhood, which is pretty cool. Eric or anybody else want to add anything to the bear bites? I know Brett recently found some cool bear bites and found some wonderful fur stuck in it. Anybody want to add?
And sometimes
Oh, yeah.
you can see these on multiple poles just going right down the road, and they'll hit like every single one of them for 8 poles in a row. They also like to hit red pine and spruce, sometimes small spruce. They seem to like the aroma that's released when they bite it. It's kind of a calling card, I guess. A little graffiti.
They like the softwood because it really leaves a mark. And Andrea asked a question about the telephone poles or utility poles are treated with a kind of a chemical. I think it's creosote. And does this impact the bear's health? And I don't know. There hasn't been there hasn't been a lot of study about that, but it's really common, and they'll bite also and mark any type of pine signs that are in camping grounds, White Mountain National Park, on top of mountains. They're really crazy for that softwood and the odor and aroma of it. And Phil wanted everybody to know that the utility poles are usually from yellow pine, and that seems to be really attractive to them. The bears just love it. So I can't wait to hear from people who maybe have been walking by these every day on their walk, and now you know you have a bear. It's just really cool.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Victor.
So about what would be the size of the range of the bear that is trying to mark? What area are we talking about? 1 square mile or less or more?
Oh, good question. I'm never good with numbers and ranges and sizes, and so I can't really answer that. I'm wondering if Eric knows the answer or has an idea about the range of a black bear.
I guess, yeah, what I'm getting at is like, how large a territory do they claim as their own? You know, this is my area. I guess they do this to ward off other bears, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the male's territory will overlap female territories. The females have a smaller territory. The males will have a larger territory. And the females, which is really interesting, the female bears, when they have female cubs, the female cubs will often stay nearby within the general area. The young males, they have to leave. They go
Uh.
pretty far. They have to range out. And so I've read, and I kind of like this, that bears are matrilineal. They pass their territory down through the female line, whereas the male bears have to head out. So
Yeah.
I wasn't really quite an answer to your question because I don't know. I'd have to look that up, and I will, and I can get back to you on that, Victor. But
Okay.
I don't know, Eric, do you know off the top of your head the range of a black bear?
I can't remember right off the top of my head, but the females are have a much smaller range. It's kind of like the bobcat too,
Mm.
and it can be pretty huge. You know, well over 20 square miles
Wow.
for the male.
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty typical for mammals. The females will have a smaller territory, and the males have overlapping territories, especially if they're in non-monogamous. So, whereas coyotes, they have sort of a range within a pack, but the foxes, which are very territorial and aren't necessarily monogamous, females have a smaller territory and the males overlap. Okay, so Jeremy just let us know. Jeremy, you want to say it? Because you want to tell us what you found out? He says males have 120 square miles and females have a 10 square mile radius.
wow.
Huge. And bears, good question. Andrea, Ivy's wondering if bears hibernate in the same areas or have kind of specific spots. And in our area, bears are really true hibernators that kind of wake and go, and they don't necessarily stay in the same place, not even through the whole winter. If it warms up, they'll get up and kind of move around, especially if it's a male, kind of stretch and then maybe go back to rest when it gets cold again in another spot. And they're kind of, we always think of Yogi Bear as an example, like he had a really big palatial hibernating spot, but really black bears have very rough conditions. They'll just kind of rest under a fallen over tree, in a brush pile, or an overhang. There's not a lot of work that goes into the area that they will go into a resting phase in. So, all right, let's move on because we have a lot of other questions. And this one, I think, is really interesting. There's some great photographs. I found this kill site about a month ago. When I did some research on the feathers, they look like red-shouldered hawk feathers. I thought it was interesting. They were all over the ground and the top of a fallen tree. It almost looked like the bird was dragged on the tree. I assumed that the predator was a bigger raptor, but the fallen tree did lean all the way to the ground. So could it have been a mammal of some sort? I'm curious if anyone has thoughts about predators.
Nice.
So let's first go to the bird guys and ask them, what do you think got eaten?
Oh boy, I'm not seeing anything there that makes me say red-shouldered hawk. So there may have been other diagnostic feathers that I don't see there.
Wait, if I can add, because this was mine and I found it. I collected some of the feathers since I have a permit and I'm able to do it as a Harris Center employee. And the pattern, I just looked up on the internet like red-shouldered hawk feathers. So the dark colors were a little broader. So I could grab some if that would be helpful. But anyways, go on. Not to interrupt.
So, I mean, it's hard to know what the species was. I mean, it's clearly a larger size bird, and the fallen tree is a plucking post that a raptor would use. So, you know, do you have any sense of when this happened? I mean, was it an old kill site?
The picture was taken about a month ago, and it seemed pretty fresh. I mean, nothing was blown like far away. I mean,
so given
the pretty concentrated.
So given, you know, it was a month ago, and given what we have in the area, so that would put it at early April. You know, it was
along the West River in Vermont. It's not that far away, but I don't know if that makes a difference.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, given the time of year, it's still early April if it was a month ago, and that's on the large size for birds. So perhaps a Cooper's, but maybe a goshawk or a great horned owl. because it's a large prey item, and I mean, if indeed it was a red-shouldered hawk, it would have to be something. I mean, that's a really tough one to explain, because the birds like red-shouldered hawks typically get predated if they're on the nest. For an animal to, you know, I guess a great horned owl could take one while it was roosting, but it would be very, I would think, very unusual. More like a nesting bird.
Can you explain what you mean by plucking sight?
So a bird will catch, a raptor will take its prey item to a favorite perch, if you know, a perch like that fallen tree, and dismember it.
So, and to Karen, when I saw this, I didn't think it was a mammal prey, a predator.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I thought it could potentially be was because the tree leans all the way down to the ground. But otherwise, I didn't have any other reason really to think that. And the feathers weren't like blunt, like it was like they were pulled out, not like snapped.
When I think of a mammal eating a bird, they will not pull the feathers off and pluck them. And you'll see in that first picture, it's almost like a circle.
Yes.
Very typical of a raptor, a bird of prey eating a bird. It's sort of in this circular pattern. Whereas a mammal is exactly what you say. They're not going to be so fussy. They'll ingest a lot of the feathers. They'll just, you know, they'll poop it out. So I was like, yeah, it definitely wasn't. I wondered, I have a question, and I wonder what Eric and Phil think about it, but could it have been a barred owl that got eaten?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, that makes more sense than a red-shouldered hawk. Because they're a lot more common.
Can I go, why don't I grab a couple of feathers and bring them for close-up? Because the edges didn't look very, you know, serrated, like an owl's feathers would look.
Yeah, go grab
go ahead.
Okay, you talk amongst yourselves.
May I ask a quick question about feathers while you're doing that? So, oops, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. So if you find a feather, I think she mentioned that you have to maybe have a permit to collect feather. I'm not sure. But anyway, if I see one on the ground, one concern that I had was like the mites that might be on a feather. Is there any, you know, is there anything I should be concerned about that? Because I found one I'd really like to keep.
Bird guys?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. It would not be something that would bother me, I can tell you. I mean, we're living in a pandemic. I'm not going to be worried about mites on feathers. I think you're safe. I really do.
Okay. That's
there is the legal question about collecting and holding feathers too.
Yes.
Which, you know, if you want to split hairs, that is, you know, I'm not going to tell my kids not to pick up feathers in the woods and bring them home. So I'm not going to tell you that either.
Yeah.
But,
okay. Wow. Here's Karen with the feathers. So let's see if we can get her. Can we see those feathers?
Let's see if I can do this in a way that's.
It's good.
Yeah.
Bill and Eric, any theories?
Yeah, I'm not gone on red shoulder. That doesn't look like red shoulder to me.
Okay.
No.
Bill, you've been awfully.
aside from raptor, I wouldn't say for sure if it were a hawk or an owl based on not being able to touch it, but it does seem to have smooth round edges. It doesn't look tawny enough to me to be a barred owl necessarily, but lighting can be tricky with this. You know, not having it in hand, it should be a little tawnier, a little softer brown, maybe.
Yeah.
The red-shouldered hawk wings, especially, are very black and white, or very contrasting. Those feathers do look very contrasting to me, but I can't say I'm a feather expert. Yeah.
Would anyone like to take a crack at this one?
Yep.
Bill, you got that one.
No, it's definitely an ostrich.
Yeah, nice. It was a little off course, I can tell you.
Biggest feather around. It must be a turkey.
That's kind of what I was thinking, a turkey, yeah.
Dark tip near the tail.
It would make a nice panache, but it may be a little too big. I don't know.
All right, let's see what else we have. I know we've got some amphibian things coming up. So we never determined what species the feather was from, but we did determine that it was definitely a a raptor that ate another bird. And Phil says he's going to hit the books, and maybe Karen, when we can all see each other, you can bring him in. Okay, this is really fascinating. Last week, while poking around in a vernal pool in Harrisville, I found 5 to 10 amphibian egg masses, both wood frog and spotted salamander, with no or few embryos left inside them. The gelatinous outer casings remain, but the individual embryos, the dark spots you typically see inside each mass that eventually turned into the amphibians, were gone. I picked up one spotted salamander egg mass that had just a few embryos remaining and saw what I thought was a large hellgrammite hanging off it. Another spotted salamander egg mass had 2 large cigar tube caddisflies attached to it. Were these invertebrates predating the amphibian embryos? I spend a lot of time in vernal pools, but have never found so many empty egg masses before. I'd always envisioned that the predators of amphibian egg masses would be larger in size, like turtles. Insect people, what say you? So Jenna, what say you?
I spent some time researching this one. I will tell you that hellgrammites are not picky from everything that I've read. So hellgrammites are the larval or nymphal form of a Dobson fly. So it's a big insect. Everything I read, somebody actually dissected their stomachs. So go imagine that. And they basically found all kinds of critters. And the idea was they're not picky. They're going to eat whatever is available to them. So definitely possible that the hellgrammite could have done that. Caddisflies are interesting because there's a lot of different kinds of caddisflies. And there are herbivorous caddisflies and predatory caddisflies. And there is a guy that did his entire PhD thesis on caddisfly diet of the predatory caddisflies. And apparently they eat newt eggs. So I couldn't read the whole thesis, not that I was going to anyway, but he only really talked about one species. So, but again, I'm guessing that a predatory caddisfly isn't going to be super picky. From the thesis that I read and some other things I read, it sounds like they are similar to a hellgrammite. They're going to eat what's available to them. So Brett, I would have to say it's definitely possible. It's fascinating.
Brett is wondering where the fellow who did his PhD research on caddisfly lived. Was it geographically in this area?
I remember it was in the Northeast. I'd have to dig it up again. But I was really only reading stuff that was in the Northeast because I didn't want to go too far away from our area. Yeah, so definitely possible. And I have to also say that hellgrammites are I wish we had a picture. That's one thing, just for people that don't know what they are. They are amazing looking creatures. And when they come out to transform into their adult form, you can often see them crawling before, and I think a lot of people, they look sort of centipede-like. They look like they have a lot of legs. So a lot of people don't know what they are and might hurt them if you were not someone who's interested in natural history. So a really amazing, amazing insect. Just makes me think of the dinosaur age and what insects must have looked like back then. But yeah, not picky. Definitely could have eaten some of these eggs out of the gelatinous mass that they're in.
Very cool. I want to just mention that Andrea had a great comment where she thought that if it had been a turtle, they would have just eaten the whole entire thing and not just worked on eating the larva, which I think, I'm wondering, I saw that John showed up. John Benjamin, he is our reptile guy. John, do you want to pipe in when turtles eat salamander and frog eggs? Do they just mound on the whole thing?
Well, I can't say I've ever observed this specific behavior, but I would imagine that a turtle, like a sort of sea turtle eating a jellyfish, they would just mow down on the whole mass. And the fact that the embryos were kind of removed from the jelly, that to me indicates that it was a predator that could get into the jelly mass. So Brett sent me a message earlier today on Instagram, and I was thinking about it, and it's a really cool idea, like of who could have eaten all these amphibian eggs. And caddisflies, like was mentioned, are incredibly diverse in their diets. So they eat all kinds of things, and there's so many caddisflies, and they're an incredibly multifaceted group of insects. And so I was thinking about it, and Brett mentioned there was a lot of them in the vernal pool, but I was thinking a caddisfly with a case couldn't get into a jelly mass very well, you know? Like it really wouldn't be a very convenient way to get to the, you know, sort of little embryo if they're carrying this big case with them. They couldn't scoop in there. And I was thinking the Hellgrammite could do that. The Hellgrammites they have the big jaws, and they're predators, and I think they're more versatile than caddisflies. So anybody can debate me about that, but that's my take on it.
John's
Yeah, I did see two. I picked up one of these egg masses, and I saw two cigar tube caddisflies hanging off it. I mean, I didn't see them eating, but they were attached to it. So I didn't see them burrowed inside or anything.
Well, I will say that I've watched caddisflies, like I've taken them out. Actually, when I've been with John's classes sometimes with the 8th graders, we'll take them out and they will come out of the mass. I mean, of their case. Yeah. Like they'll it's almost like they're wriggling out of their little sleeping bag. And sometimes they'll come almost the whole way out. So it's definitely something they could do if they wanted to get in there. They could scooch out, grab it, and scooch back in and eat in safety.
Wow, some things to haunt your nightmares. Let's go on to the next one. Brett, that was cool. Thank you. Let's see what we got. Whoa. Is this legal to show? Oh my goodness, what is going on here? Big night in Wolfboro, a case of mistaken identity. A wood frog attempts interspecies amplexus with a bullfrog. Brett, what the heck?
Yeah, this picture was sent to me. Every year I get a number of pictures every year of people sending me of wood frogs and amplexus. So amplexus is the term for the body position where the male frog links his arms underneath the female frog. And the idea here is that they have external fertilization in the water column of their vernal pools. So when she's depositing her eggs, he's extruding sperm into the water column. The closer he can get to her, the more likely that he'll be the one to fertilize her eggs. So that's how wood frogs mate in vernal pools. And every year you see the other thing is that there tend to be far more males than females in vernal pools. And so if a wood frog is able to find a female before they get to the pool, he will occasionally grab on and basically hitch a ride to the vernal pool so that he can be closest to her and not have to find a female in the pool. Because sometimes in the pools, if the ratio is really off, you'll see like 4 or 5 males trying to all get close to one female, and it's a lot of tussling and it's difficult. So sometimes you'll see wood frog pairs hopping to the vernal pool together in amplexus. Also, male wood frogs apparently are not that discerning. And so sometimes there's all kinds of stories of them attempting amplexus with non-wood frogs. And that's what's happening here. So just a few days ago, someone shared a video of a wood frog that found its way into a pool that had fish in it and was grabbing onto a fish that was trying to shake it off of its head. I've seen pictures of them doing this with spotted salamanders. I had one grab onto my finger like that a couple of years ago when I was moving it across the road away from cars, and it gripped really, really tight. It was very difficult to remove it. So in this case, that's what's happening here. The bullfrog is out. This was from April 13th, which was like our best big night of the season, the big amphibian migration night where thousands of animals are kind of on the move. Wood frog and spotted salamander that you see down below were migrating to their breeding pools. The bullfrog was just out because it was warm and wet, and they forage on these nights. In fact, I saw a report from that same night of people watching a bullfrog eat spring peepers on the road as they were migrating. So it's pretty, but this is a particularly great picture of what's going on. So wood frogs migrating to its vernal pool. The bullfrog is out and about looking for food, and I don't know how it ended.
So I have a question for you. Just 2 questions. Can you tell if the bullfrog is a male or a female based on the size of that eardrum circle and the eye?
You know, the way that I often tell is looking at, which I can't see in this picture, is looking at the chin, because certain frog species, when the males are the singers, and so when chorus, certain species have what's called a throat, like a vocal sac underneath their chin that expands to amplify the sound to help it carry further. And so if you look at the chin of a male frog that has a vocal sac, it will look kind of darker in color and maybe even a little more wrinkly when it's not inflated because there's extra kind of skin there. I don't know about the eardrum thing. I haven't heard that, although I could look it up because I have my kind of my like trusty herp field guide here that I always.
I'd always heard that for bullfrogs and some other frogs that the tapetum or the eardrum, which is the circle behind the eye, if it's the same size of the eye or larger, it's a male, and if it's smaller, it's a female. And I don't know, John.
Yeah, that's what it says in this field guide. Females, the tympanum is about the size of the eye, and the throat is white. Whereas in males, the tympanum is considerably larger than the eye, and the throat may be suffused with yellow. So this is probably a female.
Yeah,
frog.
That's cool. And I wondered, I just had a quick question about the thumbs of amphibians at this time of the year. The male thumbs, I've heard they have a special adaptation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I've read not all species. Like I know with toads, I hear about that there's it's
You guys go ahead and eat.
it's bigger for gripping. What was that?
Swollen.
Swollen. That's the word I was looking for. Yes, for easier gripping in cases like this. But I don't know that I've observed that in all species of frogs. I'd have to think about that or look it up.
Brad, is hybridization a possible outcome of a situation like this, or is that unknown in the?
This is not going to lead. This is not going to lead to successful reproduction. This is just. It's going to end with the bullfrog shrugging that wood frog off eventually, because the bullfrogs are not laying eggs now. They're not depositing eggs until much warmer weather and later in the season. So the wood frogs will be well back into the forest by the time that bullfrogs are thinking about.
So do you never see hybridization in the amphibian world, or rarely?
You see a lot of hybridization in salamanders, in related salamander species, especially Jefferson and blue-spotted salamanders. They frequently hybridize. They're both mole salamanders, which are related to the yellow-spotted one you see here, and they have really crazy hybridization where there's an entire. You can't tell from looking at them which one they are. It's you have to do DNA testing to tell if it's a true Jefferson or a true blue-spotted or a hybrid. But there's a whole kind of line of these hybrids that are female only, and they practice something that has been termed kleptogenesis. So klepto meaning stealing, and genesis, genetic material. So in salamanders, it's a slightly different, for these species of salamanders, reproduction is slightly different, but the males deposit sperm on the bottom of the vernal pool in these little packets called spermatophores. The females go and absorb those spermatophores into their cloacal openings where they fertilize the eggs internally. So with the Jefferson and blue-spotted salamanders, the hybrid females, they need a spermatophore from a true Jefferson or a true blue-spotted salamander to initiate egg development, but none of the DNA from that spermatophore gets passed along to their offspring. So they essentially clone themselves, and they are cutting the male DNA out of the equation entirely, which is pretty wild. And there's just a study came out a few years ago that showed that these all-female hybrid lines are faster at regeneration. So if they lose a tail or a toe and they can regrow it, they regrow it much faster, these hybrids do, than the true. There's like all kinds of crazy, I could go down a whole rabbit hole of this, and I won't, I'll spare you all of those details, but there's a lot of really weird stuff that happens, but I mostly have heard about it with salamanders in terms of hybridization.
I saw that Victor had a question.
Yes, just a very general question for Brett, really, and that is now that apparently things are starting to become more active in the vernal pools now. So when would be a good time to witness things that are happening in the vernal pools? Morning, evening, nighttime?
Depends what you want to see. So wood frogs are kind of done now for the year, but wood frogs will chorus. The males will sing starting in the afternoon and go into the night. So if you just want to go see them singing and starting to lay their eggs, After the first warm, rainy nights, the first few weeks after that, any warm day, you can go down there. Spotted salamanders, like the picture here, they only congress at night. And that also, sadly, is mostly done in our region for the year. April 13th was this big migration night. So the next few nights after that was when a lot of the congressing happened. Congressing is just the word for courtship for those salamanders. And now you can go into vernal pools and you can see the eggs that they have all deposited. Those are wood frog and spotted salamander eggs are both present in vernal pools right now. Wood frog eggs will probably only be there for another week or two because they hatch in take 2 to 4 weeks to hatch. Spotted salamander eggs take 4 to 8 weeks to hatch, so they'll be there for a little while. And then any clear day is a great day for going and looking for eggs. And I recommend wearing polarized sunglasses to help you see through the water more easily to see what's underneath there. But in terms of seeing the actual adult amphibians, tonight or tomorrow night, they might migrate out of the pools. So going out, I'm going to probably go out tonight and look for them when we're done here.
You're breaking up just a bit there. Would you repeat that last bit there, please?
They still need to migrate out of the pools, the salamanders. So like the next few warm, rainy nights will be good nights for going just to seeing them moving across the landscape.
Awesome.
Like tonight maybe will be good for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cool. All right, let's see. Do we have any more, Miles, or is that our last one? I can't remember. He says, Miles says, check out our video series on YouTube. Brett did a great job on Vernal Pools 101, and you can check it out on YouTube where you can see her talking about kind of the life cycle. Brett, you want to talk about that? What do you got going up there?
Yeah, I did. We were going to have an in-person event where we talked about vernal pools in a slideshow and then went out and looked for the egg masses, but we obviously couldn't do the in-person event. So I converted it into a series of 4 short slideshows that you can watch on our YouTube channel. They're not videos in that they're not like live action. It's pictures and narration, but there's one just about what vernal pools are, how to know if you found them. There's one on why they matter ecologically. There's one on egg mass ID specifically, because you can look at an egg mass and tell which species it came from. And then there's another one that's short one that's tips. Things like you're wearing your polarized sunglasses can help you see into vernal pools, and a few other tips too. So
sorry, Brett, which YouTube channel is that, please?
The Harris Center's YouTube channel. If you go to harriscenter.org, you just at the very bottom of the page, you can link to any of our social media. So and it looks like Miles also included a link in the chat feature here. So thanks for the pitch, Miles.
Yeah, that was awesome. Anyway, it looks like we're just about out of time, probably a little over time, but I'm thinking that in 2 weeks we'll do another one and another Ask a Naturalist. So keep your eyes open in the outdoors. If you find anything of interest or mysterious that you would like help identifying or figuring out, send it to Miles, which is right at the Harris Center, stallman@harriscenter.org. You can check it out on our website, and we'll be back here 2 weeks from today at the same time for another Ask a Naturalist night. And I did forget to mention that we are co-sponsored by the incredible and wonderful Post and Beam. We can't wait to get back to Post and Beam where we do our Nature on Tap programs. It's just a fabulous place, and hopefully in a few not even going to mention, sometime soon, we'll all be there and we can raise a glass together. But thank you all for tonight, for showing up, asking questions, and checking it out.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
See ya. Good night.
Bye.